subscribe and leave a comment below. r/AskReddit. What was a fact taught to you in school that has been disproven in your lifetime? Saying stop it. I don't like it stops people. Just ignore the bully. Nope. Stand up and fight, even if you lose. Your friends aren't always going to be there for the answers. I have the collective knowledge of the world in the palm of my hand. Still no friends, though. Regardless of the source, anything on the internet was considered to not be a valid reference. Not something I learned in high school, but I learned it during that age. Essentially, I was taught that applying a tourniquet in a first aid situation guaranteed that the person would lose their limb, and that it should only ever be a last resort in an exceptional situation. Turns out it takes a really long time for someone to actually lose their limb when putting a tourniquet on. And a lot of people bled to death in the beginning of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan because people were hesitant to use tourniquets. Now applying a tourniquet is one of the first steps when treating a casualty, at least in a military setting. Edit made the wording less convoluted. Also glad this is getting attention. Massive image is nothing to duck with. During the height of the AIDS scare in the mid to late 80s, one of my health teachers taught us that HIV could be spread by simply hugging or touching someone infected with it. Oh man, I used to think there was no way I would make it to adulthood without getting AIDS somehow. That people would randomly approach me and give me free drugs. Edit. Most karma I've ever got, lol. And get mad if you rejected said drugs. I was taught that in college you will spend all of your study time in a library reading and researching using books and reference catalogs. The internet was evil and full of lies and not a valid resource for academic research. I have literally never taken a book off the shelf at my college library. All my professors basically expect me to use the internet. Edit. I should note, I've done all of my general education requirements and the only papers I will be writing are scientific. There's not many paper science journals around, and certainly none in my college library. I learned that when humans were still hunter-gatherers, one of the ways they hunted was digging deep holes in the ground, setting up with spikes and then luring mammoths in those holes. Years later I saw a little article in the newspaper that this wouldn't have been possible, simply because it's not exactly easy to dig a deep enough hole in the ground without modern tools. No one was actually burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials, while in England condemnation by the church actually did lead to some burnings. In the New England colonies the more secular laws called for hanging on suspicion of witchcraft. They also crushed a guy. I had a female teacher in grade 11 health teaches that guys can't pee with their erection. I told her she was wrong and she argued with me. Source. Done it. 1974. We have to learn the metric system as the US is converting everything next year. 1976. Smoking marijuana makes you sterile. Tell that to my children. That it's impossible for girls to be colorblind. In 8th grade science, my teacher started showing our class those circles made of different colored dots. If your vision is normal, you see a number. If you're colorblind, you either don't see a number or you see a different number. When I started calling out different numbers than others in my class, he started trying to stump me. He couldn't believe I was colorblind. He was shuffling through all his cards with the circle dot numbers. He just about refused to believe it. This was in 1996. I've learned since that it's still incredibly rare for girls to have color blindness. But we're out there. You can see the Great Wall of China from the moon. Well, you can see the moon from the Great Wall of China, so that's something. That things you do bad in school go on your permanent record. That chewing gum will stay in your stomach for years if you'll swallow it. You made me swallow my gum. That's going to be in my digestive system for 7 years. In high school my teachers would preach that in college, a professor would never accept any assignment that was turned in a nanosecond after the due date. Experience has taught me that some professors are very understanding of their students' workloads and schedules, and will work with you and give extensions, accept late work, etc. On a similar note, all of my teachers said that in high school teachers would throw out any assignment that someone forgot to put their name on. The opposite happened. There would always be a big announcement to try to figure out whose it was. Hell, Even my professors in college do that. I don't know when exactly it was disproven, but I was taught that Hebrew slaves built the pyramids. They were built, in fact, by unpaid interns who were using this great opportunity to gain real insight into what it's like in a working environment. Blood inside the body is blue. That cracking your knuckles will give you arthritis. Was very careful not to crack my knuckles because of this. Study I learned got ducking arthritis, so didn't really win. That you won't have a calculator with you all the time. Beach, I have a whole computer in my pocket with access to all the world's information. And porn. Our brains cannot heal. I was in the final class for my psych major, Psychology Physiology 2, and the professor spent a fair amount of the first class apologizing to us, as we had gotten to the point that enough research had gathered to show that brains do indeed heal. He said he didn't, therefore, know how much of the information he would be giving us over the semester was going to hold up as accurate, nor what we had been taught over the previous 4 years. Psychology is really like 75 years behind other medical fields. Yo. Much of the geography I was taught in school ended up being wrong while I was still in school. Now a few borders moving or countries renaming themselves on the far side of the world would not matter so much. But I went to school in Germany in the 80s and 90s. My parents paid good money for a world atlas for my geography lessons that I was supposed to use for several years. The next year the publisher came out with a revised atlas with a little German flag on it to indicate that this one now showed a united Germany among other things. Eggs are good for you. Eggs are bad for you. Some eggs are good for you, but not too many. Eat all the eggs you can. Eggs are bad for you again. Eggs are good for you again. etc. 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 Washington and that damn cherry tree. He had 2 sets of testicles. That you will fail high school if you don't learn to write in cursive. Didn't learn cursive. Failed high school. Checkmate. You have 5 senses. Disclaimer. I grew up in a cult school. I was taught that the Native Americans offended God, but were offered one chance to come back to him. This chance was presented to them in the form of the Trail of Tears. The hardship they experienced, I was taught, is of the type that brings people closer to God. And just in case you thought this lesson was done being racist, not by a long shot, since they rejected that chance. God permanently afflicted their race with alcoholism. I mean, this was disproven since, well, it's just never been true, but it's taught at insane, fundamentalist, cult schools. Obviously I know it's a load of racist horseshit, but it's absolutely something that was taught at the school I went to as a kid. /edit. Holy crap. Did not expect this to blow up. I'll answer questions in this thread about the experience, but I don't think I'm going to probably do an Ask Me Anything. I dunno. If people are interested enough, I suppose I might. You need to drink 8 glasses of water a day, or else you'll become severely dehydrated. What happened is that someone measured the amount of water that someone consumes in one day, including the water found in fruit, other drinks, etc. He wasn't even saying that this is what we need. It's just the amount of water we get on average. Go to the best college that you can get into regardless of the cost, because your career earnings will always be enough to cover it. Career? You mean the series of jobs you jump back and forth between every 2 years? P. The Coriolis effect means toilets flush the opposite way in the southern hemisphere. Edit. Since this got a lot of traction, I'll clarify a bit. The Coriolis effect is real, and can cause large things to spin differently in the northern versus the southern hemispheres. Large storms, for example. Toilets, however, are much too small, and are subject to a variety of other forces, such as which way the water is pushed, the shape of the bowl, etc. for the Coriolis effect to make any negligible difference. As other people have mentioned, it is possible to observe the Coriolis effect under perfect conditions, just not in toilets. My 6th grade math teacher told us that God gave us butts for spanking. The 90s were a weird time. Edit. This was a public school, not a Catholic one, and she didn't spank us. She just talked about wanting to, and she was 65 and I did not find it at all arousing. That brains do not generate new neurons after birth. Christopher Columbus proved the world was round. The US will be switching to the metric system soon. Had a substitute science teacher once say that bumblebee flight violates the laws of physics. No, it doesn't. This hasn't been disproven really. It's just an oversimplification that was never corrected until I read about it on my own. In elementary school I was taught that there were 3 states of matter. In high school I was taught that there are 4 states: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. Then I read about Bose-Einstein condensates and realize that barely even scratched the surface, and there's over 20 plus that have been discovered. A lot of educated people aren't aware of this, I found. Simply because unless you go into a science field it probably won't affect you one bit. Still, I think it would be nice if it was at least mentioned in passing for the nerds like me who would care. That insulin producing cells in the pancreas are gone for good once they are destroyed by type 1 diabetes. New research shows that they do get reproduced by the pancreas, but the autoimmune response destroys them again straight away. There is ongoing research into how to turn this autoimmune response off, with some headway being made with a tuberculosis vaccine. There are flavor sections to the tongue. A version of the food pyramid got an awful lot of brain time when I was in elementary school. You need to eat 4 pounds of corn a day. Wash it down with 1.5 L of milk. Tell your parents. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comment.